Hey, thanks for joining us today. I'm Ruth.
I'm Cory.
Okay.
Take two. I'm Ruth.
And I'm Cory. Welcome to the Ruth and Cory Show. Right. Here we go. Well, we've got a really cool episode for you today. We're going to be talking about the divine.
Yes, the divine.
The divine.
Who, what, where, when, what was taught, what was told.
What do I believe? What was I told to believe?
Is it safe to explore?
Ooh, isn't that like going against all of the things that we were programmed to believe?
Isn't that heresy?
Heresy. I'm a heretic? You called me a heretic? All right, well, it's coming in nicely.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so yeah, we really want to dive in today. We're going to be talking about, what were you programmed to believe? A lot of us were brought up in, whether it be family situations, community situations, religious organizations, but you have been programmed to a degree. Everybody has. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see how that programming may have taken you through something called the dark night of the soul, which is a transition time, which we're going to talk about. It's really fascinating stuff. But we're going to also challenge you. We're going to challenge you to define what you believe God is. Can you really come up with a definition? Can you put words to what it is that you believe?
Right.
Or worship or whatever.
And to recognize as well that your belief might be changing or growing, exploring, and to be okay with that.
That's right, exactly.
We really want people to be okay because we've been and we still are going through tremendous growth periods of learning who God is, who sourced the universe.
Right, yes.
And even an atheist, I was thinking, even an atheist has a worldview. And so we've all been programmed, even if it's that there is no God. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. I meet some amazing people who have that programming and are on their journey to discover God in their own way.
Yes.
It's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is. The one thing that we do want to really point out here too is that we're not trying to influence right or wrong. We're not trying to influence belief. All we want to do is we just want to bring another facet of what do you want to say? Another facet of information to help you decide. I don't want anybody to take what I say as gospel and create their worldview based off of what I say. You can hear, because I like to listen to other people because it helps me develop my own. But I would say that my worldview is truly mine. It does change as I learn and grow and experience. Mm-hmm. But anybody who ever tells you, hey, I've got the way, I've got the truth, this is how it is because I'm saying it. Anybody tells you that, just turn around, walk away, or run.
And that's where we've come from. We've come from the age of Pisces, which is very traditional and locked in. And it's actually the age of spiritual illusion in its darkness, in its darker form. And that was an age and a period of time where we were so dense that we oftentimes told each other, if you don't believe this, there's going to be X, Y, and Z consequences. Yeah. And so we're going now into a period of soul development where we're developing our own spiritual sovereignty. We have to make our own decisions. Right. Otherwise, we actually are not as much like God, because God is free will. Source, the light side, whatever you believe, the side of light, the higher realms of light, are free will.
So were we ever given that option in the past?
We were, but sometimes the social structures were so crazy, you might have been burned at the stake.
And let's even go back further, because we can take some examples of that from our own biblical text, where the people said, we don't want direct connection, we want connection through you. You want to recall that story?
Yes, in our last podcast that we've done, the Spiritual Technology series, go ahead and check out that podcast. I talked about the story of Moses and the people of Israel. Mm-hmm. Moses received the 10 Commandments from Jehovah, came down the mountain, and the people said, Moses, you can talk to us, but we don't want to talk to this being in the sky on that mountain. And they surrendered their spiritual sovereignty to a man. And it actually set the course of Israel into a lot of ups and downs with the kings and the judges, and going back into worshiping this God and then this God, and abundance and then poverty, and because they couldn't decide their worldview or their own personal sovereignty and connection.
Right. And that actually then led all the way into Rome becoming a church.
Yeah.
Through the entire social structure, political structure, Rome became the church. Yes.
So it's a beautiful time that we're living in, to be able to be okay with learning and growing. And our viewpoint.
We have that freedom now. We do truly have that freedom now, because the veil is getting thinner.
It is. It is.
Okay, I've got some questions.
Okay.
Let me see here. So the first question is, who were you told God is or was? Or
So
is it a him or a her, or what? Define God for me, Ruth.
So I was taught that God was a he. I was taught that God was a being in the sky on a throne. Some people, what are the common phrases we hear?
Sky Daddy.
The man upstairs.
The man upstairs.
And it represented one being who was like a king, who basically created all the worlds, created everything, and then has a set of rules and structures that if you don't follow them, there was going to be judgment. With this God came, as a child, a lot of fear. I have a lot of programming of tight tenseness in my relationship sometime to the divine, because I got such a perfectionist mindset. And I'm a Virgo energy. I'm Virgo rising. That's the perfectionist energy. I actually adopted OCD. It was not diagnosed, but it was a literal OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, concerning God when I was a child. And this was, if my parents told me to do something, that if I didn't do it perfectly, like straighten the books on your desk, and I didn't do it perfectly, I would do it over and over and over, and it would take me 4 minutes to straighten the books, and 10 minutes to wash a dish, 10 minutes to brush my teeth. I was a paranoid child. I had the legit definition of OCD.
But look at that smile. Didn't it pay off?
It wasn't just born from my identity with God. It was born with, I think, some of the family raising me in that concept of God. Like, how dare you disobey? How dare, don't do that. But I would go to bed every day and praying, and I'd think for the last 10 minutes, did I do anything wrong that I need to ask God? I cried myself to sleep for about several months. It was legit OCD over the concept of God. And I never told anyone, and I don't think I've actually told anyone other than one other person. So this is huge for me, Cory. And I, though, still developed a beautiful relationship with God. I would take my notebook and as a girl and go write letters to God, and then I'd write letters back, and it kept me, and I don't think I ever lost my connection. As a child, I read the Bible every day. I still did, but there's still that programming that was just slightly off of God as being a taskmaster.
So it's interesting that you explain it that way, because I think a lot of people still understand it like that. In your opinion, was there ever a period in history where that type of understanding was the right type for the social and economical and political climate of that time? In other words, was that paradigm correct for the time period?
That's actually a good question, because I do feel that my parents adopted a lot of the Middle Age and the Dark Age mindsets, where there was no literacy, there were no books, they had zero knowledge of the town outside where they lived. And so they had the connection to the saints, which were statues, and then they had the priest, which came from the church. That's all they had to connect. They didn't have a Bible, they didn't have a... So I feel like my parents adopted, studied, and even came from that kind of mentality. So they brought it up to me. And in that time frame, when they were peasants, they enjoyed a priest blessing them with holy water. They felt safe. They loved hearing a priest tell them what to do, and I think they had a sense of security. But you know that we're called to spiritual sovereignty. And so I came in as a soul to actually transmute and heal that, to absorb it, to look at it in the face, to face that kind of darkness of if you don't measure up. And then I had to actually change it. And I led the way in my family for them to really look at the way they view God again.
Okay, so...
Well, I would love to hear your experience.
You want me to talk? All right, so growing up, I was brought up in a military family. We traveled all over the world, so I was brought up in a lot of different churches with going to Sunday school, going to church, a lot of indoctrination. But there was always that nagging feeling in the back of my head. I just could never quite understand how a truly loving God would allow his children to be eternally punished in a lake of fire. Well, we can go into that later, but the whole lake of fire thing is a complete misunderstanding of something that Jesus said outside the gates of Jerusalem. That's a whole nother story. That's a fun one.
Yes,
but anyway.
we'll definitely have to get into that topic, because I have a lot to say about that.
We'll talk about that another
But
time.
that concept of the lake of fire can be very traumatic, especially in your upbringing.
Sure. I just couldn't understand, and I never could get it through my understanding of how this omniscient, loving God would even make that an option. And the answer I was always given was, well, because he wants you to decide with your free will. I'm like, no, if this is the only life I have to live, and there's only one decision I got to make, there, I'm done. Now what?
Because we all make mistakes.
Right. We all make mistakes, and then where is the growth in that? Then come to realize that I couldn't understand how this, again, purely loving being could be so insecure. Yeah. Insecure and vengeful. Never could get that through. So like you, I was kind of brought up with these ideas, and it was right out of the Bible, and I'm not discounting the Bible, by the way. I'm just saying there are certain
a lot about the Bible in our podcasts.
There's certain parts of it that I just don't agree with anymore. So the question here is, how do I define
who were you taught God was?
Who was I taught God was? He was an old man with a beard sitting up in heaven, sitting up in heaven. In other words, God was separate from me. He was separate. That just took me down a whole other rabbit hole, but I don't want to go there now. So being separated really is what it is. And just because my ancestors a long time ago made one mistake and ate an apple, that means that I'm separated from my father. I had nothing to do with that.
Yes. Yeah. And I think what we were taught of is the projection of the reality of the continuation. It's the classic spiritual narcissistic, you're guilty. You're a child and you're guilty because this person did this to you. It's the classic spiritual narcissist.
It is. Or you were born from original sin.
Yeah, I'm guilty to actually be a human. Yeah. And we're not discounting. These doctrines had all very important places in our history. But I think that there was always something where we feel there's something more.
Right. And that I think that was my whole point. I never could get past certain teachings, even though I was told, you just got to believe it on faith.
Exactly.
What? I got to believe it on faith? What do you mean? No. That is a coward's answer to a quick way out.
Yes.
In my opinion, it's a coward's answer to
having no answer.
To having no answer. That's exactly right. And
now, do we have all the answers?
No.
But we are willing to explore those questions.
I'm willing to go look for that information. Like you said, I'm willing to explore and find what was the true meaning here. What were we really supposed to get out of this thing that we call religion? I have friends of mine that believe I'm no longer a Christian. And I argue I'm more Christian now than I ever was.
Yes. I still call myself a Christian.
Following Jesus's teachings, not only from a biblical text, but also from other ancient texts where he's fully documented performing miracles. The Vedic texts even mention him. He's mentioned in the Quran. I mean, all over the place. Why aren't we looking at these things? Why aren't we looking at these things?
And why haven't we been allowed to ask questions?
Another good one.
That's a big thing when we come into our own spiritual sovereignty.
I got a question. I got a question. Where was Jesus between the ages of 12 and 30? If we're looking to Jesus as our Savior, why can't we know what he was doing for those 17, 18 years?
I want to know, why did two people write the book of Genesis and nobody knows who they are?
Oh,
And that, as a little girl, I was like, wait, someone else wrote the first chapter of Genesis and nobody knows who wrote that?
Oh.
So was it put in by the Roman Catholic? I don't saying it's wrong. I'm just saying there are questions we need to ask.
Yes. Why is 1/3 of the New Testament written by one person? And there were 12 disciples, right?
12 disciples.
Yeah.
And
Plus
we don't
Jesus.
Have, I've actually read the book of Thomas. Oh my goodness. And the book of Bartholomew, who wrote about the life of Mary.
Right.
Before she became the mother. She talked to angels. And the men of the church wrote down her works like they revered her.
Yes.
She literally, the priest in the temple says this 14-year-old girl would eat angels' food and talk to angels around her.
Right.
I'm like, why is that not in the Bible?
So let's answer that question.
Okay.
Opinions here. Take it for what it's worth. If it resonates, keep it. If it doesn't, throw it away. It's fine. The greatest tool for controlling a population is fear.
Fear.
Now, if you were to read these alternate texts that somehow didn't make it through the Council of Nicaea and any other council that decided to put the Bible together.
Which nobody knows who was on that council.
That's right.
We have no record of who was on that council.
That's right. No, there's no.
But they decided the Bible for us.
They decided for us. If these alternate texts had been placed into the Bible and we had been brought up with these alternate texts and we were told that they were true and we believed them, then there would be no control over the human population. Why? Because those texts explain how powerful we really are.
So what you're saying, to give a woman the ability to talk to angels was scary in a more male patriarchal point of view. So they wanted, possibly, let's not put the words into their mouth, but they might have wanted to keep those books out because a woman who can talk to an angel gets cosmic divine wisdom.
Why do you think God's called a father? Subjugation of feminine.
Yes.
Why though?
It was the male patriarchal age at the time.
Because the divine feminine is damn powerful. That's why. That is why. The divine feminine has a much thinner veil than the divine masculine. You chicks, oh my God, man, you guys are like already so connected. Not like us dudes.
We're learning,
Yeah.
that's for sure. But to clarify, we do believe divine masculine, divine feminine are both within.
Absolutely.
But I was thinking this morning,
They've gotta
coming
be
here to
balanced.
this restaurant, I was like, we need to invent a word, Cory, that represents balanced masculine and femininity. We don't have any. Androgynous was like a being that has both a masculine and feminine balance energy.
There's representations of that in like the yin and the yang symbol. But I don't know. I think you're right.
And we don't have a pronoun to say that either, to say he or she or it. Anyway, side note, let's go back.
Oh, that's really good. Now you got me thinking.
Put it in the comments if you have any ideas about how to blend Mother Earth and Father Spirit.
Yeah. What would you call somebody who's completely balanced in both feminine and masculine, divine feminine, divine masculine energy? How would you define that?
Right.
What would you call it? What would you call that person? What would be a good pronoun? That's a great point.
Gay.
Great.
Not gay. Gay is a term of having a masculine or feminine tendency. So we want to make a distinction here of the physical realm versus the energetic realm, because to have both masculine and female in the physical realm is not in our 3D reality
Understanding.
at this point.
Yeah, it's not in
We
our
don't
understanding.
have that kind of body.
Right.
We used to. Before
we will
Adam
again.
and Eve separated, the human was androgynous. They had both masculine and feminine. And so we will eventually have that again. But we're talking about energy. We're not talking about physicality or gay or transgender. We're talking about energy.
Energy, right?
So,
not physical. 3D.
I knew I was hearing someone was going to type in the chat, gay.
What? I think I already did. No.
Anyway, yeah, we're talking about energy here.
Right, talking about energy. So going back to this whole idea of fear being being the tool that's used to control the population. If we take these alternate texts, like what's the one called, the Book of Mary, that Mary Magdalene, the town whore? Are you kidding me? If you go read that alternate text, she was just as spiritually connected as Jesus was and could perform the same things he could.
And the other texts from like Gospel of Thomas and Bartholomew confirm that. They said that she was actually one of the teachers Jesus had teach, because she could gather, channel information.
Now, what would that do to our concept of Christianity today? Or even the concept of any of the other major religions, Islam? What would it do to Judaism? So no wonder these books were kept away from us. They would completely free the population.
And if I could add something here, woman, this is going to sound really bad, y'all, okay? But bear with me. Woman who actually neglected or set aside the Bible is what actually brought in women's rights. They dared to go against biblical principles that said a woman, like in the Old Testament, a woman couldn't own property and she couldn't vote. She didn't have any say in religion. And they dared to ignore key biblical texts that were for an earlier period. They were for 2,000 years ago.
Right.
And so they dared to ignore certain biblical texts and follow a concept that says, I have a relationship with God, and I feel that this is not for me. I should be able to own my own house as a single woman.
Yep.
And we as a society, we just assume a woman, but we don't realize what kept that social structure in was these teachings put in by the church, and the books kept out of the church, and it kept a social structure.
Well, and again, I'll go back to the whole concept of why was the divine feminine suppressed? Honestly, because I think of how powerful it is. And if you think about it, right, it really doesn't make sense to have one particular gender be more powerful than the other.
No.
It makes no sense whatsoever. We're always stronger when we're combined.
Especially when they both come from higher realms.
Right. You just say, well, that's because, men wanted to be in control. I don't really buy that. I mean, that may have been a part of it. I honestly believe, again, opinions, I honestly believe that the divine feminine was suppressed because of how powerful the divine feminine is. I think the divine feminine was the key for humanity to understand its own power. For you and for me, combining the feminine and the masculine divine feminine is when you really come into understanding who you really are. So if it could have been the other way around, and in fact, in times past, it was. Their societies were more divine feminine controlling rather than the masculine.
In fact, before the flood, it's taught in esoteric Christianity that the feminines ruled, which is why they got all the genetic modification and the woman high priestess rituals, and they kind of went to the dark side, messed up the gene pool because the woman got too connected to the dark, and it went.
Didn't go
That's
well.
One viewpoint.
That's one viewpoint.
And it's definitely what the Hindus, the Vedic scriptures, and esoteric Christianity and they teach that we were once led by the divine feminine.
The divine feminine. Now, how did it go? Well, it went about as well as it's going now, right?
When any one energy leads, it's going to be imbalanced.
Right. And I think that's the crux of the story right there. You cannot be your full self when you're unbalanced. And if you just think of it from a physical perspective, when one of your bodily systems is out of balance, what does it do? It throws your entire body out of balance. You feel off, right? You're not feeling your best today. Well, it's because you've got some imbalance going on.
And tying this back to the whole, who is God to you? Who were you told? Come to think about it, we were told an imbalanced view.
Oh, right up front.
God.
Yes.
Where it was only masculine, only male angels, only, certain things like that. And so we're here to help bring balance to our view and our connection to God.
And I think you would agree. When Ruth asked me to do this podcast with her, I said, Ruth, I'm 20 years older than you. What the hell do you want with me? And what was your comment? Do you remember what you said?
I remember I mentioned I need some solid divine masculine energy.
Right.
To anchor me down to earth.
Right.
Is that what I said?
That's exactly right. That's one of the things that opened my eyes to it. The balance is the key. With our energies, we work great together. We work fantastic together. I keep Ruth grounded. She keeps me creative. It really works well. Let's kind of bring this back to and finish up this question about who do you believe God is, or who do you believe the divine is? I believe it's us. I believe it's all of us, and not just human beings. I think anything that exists has a consciousness, and
I do.
to me, opinions. To me, God is the collective consciousness, the all, the I am. Period.
Yes. Some people say source consciousness to say that's where we came from.
Right. Yeah. We are all fractals of that source consciousness.
That's good, yeah.
And so that's my opinion. That's who I believe the divine is. That's who I believe Creator God is. Not male or female. A perfect balance of masculine and feminine, and probably some other genders we don't even know about.
Yes. The perfect balance, an entire different energy.
Right. Well, yeah, it is. Well, it is. But
but I know what you mean. Like,
I'm not even sure you can limit it to male and female. I mean, if God is the all, the I am, then that means infinite. Infinite. Right. There is no duality. There is no.
What's popping into my mind is the spirit of different animals. They have their own energy, but as we ascend and grow, you can actually connect to some of the spirit of some of these animals.
That's right.
And then other angels, we only view them, cosmic beings, as having a masculine and feminine, but some of them might have a completely different energy. They categorize as different. So that's just the beginning.
Worms.
Of infinite. Yes.
Worms. They're not male or female, or are they both? Right. Anyway, so I think that was a good wind up to that question.
Yes, I would love to know a little bit about your experience, how you changed. How you changed from being taught God was a man in the sky to consciousness and all.
So this is gonna bring us to one of the things we're really excited to talk about, called the dark night of the soul. The dark night of the soul. Now, say it to yourself. The dark night of the soul. Coming up on Halloween. That's kind of cool. Let me get my orange rock.
Protection.
My protection. So the dark night of the soul doesn't have to be a scary or intimidating, or you don't have to be worried about it. The dark night of the soul is nothing more than going through a transition period. That's what the dark night of the soul is. Now, it's called the dark night of the soul because the transition goes something like this. I've been brought up for 50 years to believe that God is a white man with a beard sitting up in heaven away from me, and I wasn't allowed to have anything to do with him because I was born in original sin from my ancestors. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, at least I know the truth, right? Dark night of the soul for me occurred a couple years ago when I started to question. Those things and really, really started looking for answers. I started looking for answers in places that I was told I should not go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow. Don't read that book. That's satanic. Don't read that book. That's not the truth.
My favorite one is, there's a reason why they left it out of the Bible.
There's a reason why, because they didn't want
Who left it out of the Bible, and why did they? Who?
Because they didn't want you to know how powerful you really are.
1,500 years ago?
1,500 years ago, right.
But that is one of the classic, there's a reason why they didn't accept the Book of Enoch, Cory, so don't read the Book of Enoch.
Don't read it. It will take you down the dark path.
It'll teach you about angels.
Like we're doing Star Wars or something. Go down the dark path. Become what is that? What's the...
oh, yeah, the one with
the bad guy?
The Darth Vader.
Oh, Sith. Sith. I would be a Sith. Sith Lord.
Yes.
So, dark night of the soul occurred for me when I started to really question these things and came to the realization that there is more truth out there than what we have been. There is more truth out there for me than what I had been told. That's my opinion. And so that was my transition time. I have been told that I'm moving further and further away from God. I've been told that, oh, your mother wouldn't like that. Now, my mother was a biblical counselor. Your mother wouldn't like that because that's not scriptural. And that didn't come from a family member, by the way. That came from a friend who said that. My family's actually curious. I don't think they liked it at first, but they're kind of curious. The things that I've learned, they're interested in hearing what I have to say now.
But it puts you at risk of not only challenging your own worldview, but also possibly upsetting people. And that can be part of the dark night of the soul. So you go against popular opinion or approval.
All right. But here's what I found. And yes, I was worried about that when I was going through my dark night of the soul. I didn't want people to think, I didn't want that criticism. Oh, your mother wouldn't approve. That's my mom.
Yeah.
It's my mom. Of course she's going to approve. She loves me. She may not like it, but she would still
love you.
Love me, right? So I was worried about that. And my mom passed 3.5 years ago before I even started this adventure. So the moral of the story is the dark night of the soul is a time of transition. It's remember the lyrics that I read about the dark night of the soul in the last.
Check out that podcast.
Difference between a journey and adventure. That's what we did. Yeah. But we did talk about the dark night of the soul a little bit during that podcast. So yeah, check out the last one. There's lyrics from an artist describes the dark night of the soul rather interestingly, put it that way. What did he call it? Dangerous. Irresistible. That was the other thing, yeah. And irresistible. It could be uncertain, dangerous, but irresistible. And
you just have to get the answers. You have to go through it. There's no turning back.
And once you start, it's like, that was so coming out of the dark night of the soul. That's when I realized I was gaining more and more understanding of all these forbidden things that I wasn't supposed to know about, and really made me understand who I am, why I'm here, who Jesus is. He's a buddy of mine. And you know what? I talk to Jesus more now than I ever did before.
When you get to know who they are on a personal level or in your own way, it strengthens your connection to the divine. It does not take you away from it.
That's right.
When done right and when done with a pure heart, when you go through that dark night of the soul, that transition with pure intentions, not in anger or bitterness from what we were taught, that's where some people just completely leave the concept of God, is when they see something that they've been taught, but they get so angry at it that they head off into drugs or alcohol
or whatever, or just like denying everything. Yeah.
Anyway.
So I'll say one more thing about this, then I want to hear your story. As I was going through this transition, this purification process of purging dense energies, that's part of the lyrics, isn't it?
Yes.
Purging of dense energies. Just thinking to myself, I'm like, wait a minute, I've got this direct connection. I'm going to go right to the source. So in meditation, I asked Jesus to come visit me. He did. He showed right up. And I just asked him a simple question. I asked him, have I told you the story?
No, if you have, I don't remember.
I asked him a simple question. I said, Jesus, is the Bible accurate? He looked at me and he said, it's accurate enough.
Wow.
And what that meant, now he didn't say these words and he didn't have to, because I had a knowing and an understanding just being in his presence at that moment. What that meant was love. Be kind. All of those virtuous things that we're told are accurate. Those were the main points of his teachings, was to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Know thyself. Take care of the orphans and widows. I mean, that's what he meant.
True.
That's what he told me in that meditation.
That if you wanted to find God, you could find him. Yeah. It would jumpstart your connection to the divine. Right?
Yes.
Accurate enough. If you truly want to find God, you will find it through reading the ancient text.
That's right. You will. So anyway, that's my story of the dark night of the soul. And now, one other thing. Sorry.
Okay. No, please.
Expect multiple. Expect multiple dark nights of the soul. There's not just one. It's not like you just go through this, this period of transition and it's over. As you grow, you will continue to go through dark nights of the soul. And I love them.
I'm glad you do.
I do. I love having my old paradigms challenged.
Yeah. It is a feeling of freedom, sovereignty, a lightness when you grow your mindset and connect more. There's a freedom to that.
Yeah, there is.
When you come out the other side. Anyway, okay, so the next question we're going into is...
I spit my gum out.
Oh! After 45 minutes, he listened to me. Is that what you're doing right now? Oh.
So the dark night of the soul, again, is just a transition. It's a transition period of where you're purging dense energies, you're questioning things that you've believed to be true for an amount of time, and realizing that there may be additional truth out there that you didn't know about. So it's a quest, it's an adventure, and it is irresistible. But I want to hear about yours, Ruth. So why don't we start? Is that the one you want to do? You want to talk about your first Dark Night of the Soul?
Yeah, because I think there's different degrees of Dark Nights of the Soul depending on your stubbornness or how entrenched you are in something.
That's a good point.
Sometimes you need to be shaken.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I have energy of Sagittarius in me, which is religious dogma in its shadow side. So I can get really deep and really firm. And I came from families that were very, very firm. Almost a cult family where we weren't allowed to visit other churches. We weren't allowed to have a lot of friends. And it was but that's what I chose to come into. So I needed a dark night of the soul when I actually, at 19, I began studying just different other churches that had slightly different beliefs than me. And that was very taboo. And the church that we started into was speaking in tongues. And of course, my family believed that was of the devil. And so, no, you're not going to go there. But they had a certain presence in their heart that resonated with me. And they were a little bit more joyful than my family was. So I began studying it on my own in secret, okay? Yeah, researching it, not letting my dad know, secretly going to some sort of churches. I remember opening one of their Bibles that had teachings about the Holy Spirit, and I was reading their interpretations of like the book of Acts and how the Holy Ghost came down. And I was just like, I'm going to go to their house so I can read that part of their interpretations. For 2 years, we kept it hidden. And the Dark Night of the Soul happened when I finally told my dad, I'm a Pentecostal.
Oh my God.
To a Baptist preacher.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I don't mean to laugh. That's hilarious.
No, it was funny.
And I think anybody out there who understands the difference between
denominations.
Those denominations would laugh as well. I mean, and you can laugh at it now, but I'm not trying to make light of that age of 21, going to your father who's a Baptist preacher saying, I'm a Pentecostal. That must have been terrifying.
For him. And I probably didn't quite do it in the right way, but I also felt I wasn't being authentic. I wasn't angry. I was just like, I believe in the Holy Ghost. And so if Paul was a Pentecostal, so can I be. That was what I told them. Anyway, and for 5 days, he was not happy. He started grounding us. Me and my brother and sister were also secret Pentecostals for 2 years. Anyway, he started grounding us. He started fining us, taking away money. It was at that time where he refused me to write my first book. He just did everything he could. He had some mental health issues, so this is very extreme. But for some reason, I chose this Dark Night of the Soul. And for 5 days, he sort of like played tug of war and tried to convince us. And then on the 5th day, he gave us an ultimatum and says, you can't live here and be a Pentecostal. So we actually had our backpacks packed, a toothbrush and one change of clothes, and we headed out that day, me and my younger brother and sister. I don't think he was expecting that. We went to our neighbor's house who were Pentecostals. They had no clue our dad was actually like that. They were actually friends, but they had no clue. It was a very traumatic time, Cory. It was one of those times where I felt like Queen Esther when she said, if I perish, I perish.
Oh my gosh.
Like if I end up on the street, but I knew what I knew, and my worldview had changed to believe that the Holy Spirit could live inside of me and I could do healing and I could cast out devils and I could speak in tongues, and I didn't do any of it. Like at the time, I just believed that it was real and for today.
Yeah.
And so that was a journey to where I am now, where we work with Reiki and I do light language and I channel my guides. That was the beginning. And so I lost my family, and for 7 years my dad refused me to talk to my mom. And in those 7 years I went to Bible school and learned to speak in tongues, and I healed people and cast out devils and was a basic old-fashioned Pentecostal girl.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so that was the journey. Maybe some of you have similar experiences where your family didn't fully accept you. Maybe it's just friends. I lost my family during that time.
And I'm sure some friends as well.
Well, we didn't have any friends.
Oh, that's right. You weren't allowed to have friends.
You weren't really.
Because friends were of the devil.
Yeah. Friends of other churches.
Of other churches.
And of course, if they weren't saved, you couldn't
you could not talk to them at all. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, that was the dark night of the soul. But what had happened is it forced me, not having something can sometimes force you to look at, why don't I have this? Why am I not allowed to read the Bible and interpret it differently?
So you just start to question.
Yes.
And that's what leads you down the path to the dark night of the soul. And again, the dark night of the soul does not have to be scary or something you need to avoid. It really, and then
it's a transition point.
Your experience or opinion on this may be different than mine, but it's exciting.
Being able to become who I am is just amazing.
The pull for me to become who I really am is what drove me to find the answers.
And you're not being authentic to your true self.
That's right.
In that paradigm.
Yeah, and when you start to understand then that you were actually living someone else's plan, you're like,
someone else's worldview.
Someone else's worldview.
Someone else's religion.
Someone else's beliefs. You were actually living those.
I was living a lie.
A lie. That's a great way to put it. That's exactly how I felt too. I was living a lie. I was not living as my true self. And since I broke out of that, went through my dark night of the soul, and came up with my own understanding of who I am and why I'm here, I have never felt more free.
Yes.
And I will go right back to the Bible when Jesus says the truth shall set you free, because that truly is the meaning of that verse, in my opinion.
Well, yes, and it's this next step toward truth that sets you free, and then the next step, and the next step. It's always a little bit more true. I remember when I came out and I sat in my neighbor's house and I sang the Cinderella song, "So This Is Love." I just said that because I felt so free. My dad, my other brother, and my mom were shocked that we would dare to leave, but I felt so relieved because I was finally being true to the next step of who I felt I was.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Prior to the dark night of the soul, right? You're afraid of the outcome. Because we're taught to be afraid of the unknown. I'm not necessarily taught, but most human nature is fear of the unknown, right? Once you get there and you realize that the other side, what the other side of that transition had to offer, you're like, come on,
I wish I had done it
more.
before.
And yet, I was 52 years old. 52 years. Now, that's because I chose it.
Yeah.
This is the life that I chose to come into, and I was for 52 years. I was supposed to be learning. I was supposed to be somebody else. At age 52, I started through my transition time, through my dark night of the soul time, started questioning, and I came out now at 55, where I've got a ton of background experience, wisdom, and being able to apply those things to who I really am now. It's at the right time. In other words,
it is the right time.
Right here. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, and that's why it took me up to this time, this age, to get here.
Yeah, and this book would never have come out if I hadn't been faced with people who didn't agree with that worldview. And I would never have been challenged to write a book to help other people facing that same dogma of where I talked about light language and how it's in the Bible and how it's spiritually and metaphysically based, or talked about tarot or Reiki, and this book came out of the experiences I chose.
Yeah. And there you go. And so you choosing to go through the dark night of the soul has then actually touched hundreds of people. her decision, that one decision to do that, has touched hundreds of people through this book and through her being her divine, authentic self. She's a cool person to hang out with, by the way.
And it helps you forgive those that maybe didn't accept you, because you understand what it does for you.
Yes, and that's another good point. So I'm going to just bring this up real quick. I had an experience this morning. Can I read that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This person is extremely, extremely religious. So when this person just recently saw my Facebook page where it's a picture of me with my sound bowls, got a little upset with me. What are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean, what am I doing? So this person sent me a message on Facebook. It was something about Halloween. Church needs to stop making excuses for participating in the occult and then calling it harmless. And I commented on it and I said, yeah, Christmas and Easter too.
So you were being sarcastic.
I probably did have a little bit of sarcasm in there, but it was actually very truthful as well.
Because they come from pagan traditions, and so we have to make sure we don't adopt the negativity.
Right.
Okay, I got you.
So if we're going to be saying this about Halloween, then why aren't we saying it about Christmas and Easter as well?
I get you. Yep.
Because nowhere in the Bible does it tell us to decorate a tree, which is a pagan ritual, by the way. And it doesn't tell us to raise rabbits for the eggs so we can hide them. What does this tree and this rabbit have to do with Jesus anyway?
Right.
Okay, so don't sit there and tell me we need to stop participating in the occult when we're going to sit there and celebrate Christmas and Easter.
I got you.
All right.
Very good. Very good.
That was my thought process. So that's why I said Christmas and Easter too. I'm just going to read what this person said. I am saddened to see you so far from God. My response to her, I gave the gender away. I didn't mean to. Oh well. My response to this person, your emotions are your own, as is your misunderstanding. You have no idea where I stand with God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Her response to this, yes, I do. I have discernment.
Yeah. So there's no reasoning, no discussion. It's all black and white and very judgmental.
Now, yes. Now, I'm not going to respond back to this person, and this is what I told you when I first got here today. The old me would actually say, wow, I really feel sorry for you. I really feel sorry for you. How sad you must be. What a narcissist you are. And I'm actually saying this all right now. Anyway, this is narcissistic. You think you know me? My initial response to that this morning was, I really have a lot of compassion for you because you're going through your own adventure. And it's not that I don't feel bad for you. I don't feel sorry for you. I just have compassion for you. And that's why I don't feel like I need to respond to that. So it's, again, the other side of the dark night of the soul, right? I don't need to feel sorry for anybody because we have all chosen to come here and to live this experience. We chose it.
Yes.
We decided to do this, right? She decided to do this. I decided to do this. I don't need to feel sorry for her. I don't even need to feel sorry for the homeless person on the side of the road begging for money. I feel compassion for them.
Right.
I feel compassion for them. But
you don't want to stoop to anything that's going to lower your vibration or put you in a state where you are hindered from being at your best.
Right. And what hinders you from being at your best in that state when you're feeling sorry for somebody? It's you putting yourself higher than them.
Yes.
And that's not what you want to do. You can feel compassion, which puts you on an even playing field because you know that person is going through their stuff that they chose to go through because they need to in order to grow as a soul.
Yes.
Just like I'm doing the same thing, just like Ruth is doing the same thing. We're all equal.
Yeah.
We are all equal.
All at different points of our journey too, because I guarantee it.
Adventure.
Some of the most dogmatic people in my lifetime in the church community actually ended up switching around to being, because I used to be like her. And now look at me now,
I was too.
Doing a podcast on who is God.
Yep.
But sometimes you have to face that dark point of yourself and say, no, this is the way it is. And then somehow when you dare to
question it,
something starts changing. Well, is that really me? It doesn't feel right. So who knows what she's going through even now.
Right.
with your responses.
Right. It's hard to say. So I'm gonna actually wind this up.
Cory, this was fun.
This was a lot of fun, Ruth. But
I learned a lot about you too.
you did.
I'm sure you learned
and
a lot.
I learned a lot. Every podcast we do, it's
And
something new.
That was only one dark night of the
That
soul.
was only one. Right.
Okay, that's enough.
Okay. All right. So that'll be enough of that
Thank you
one.
for joining us.
Really
everyone.
appreciate it. But we're not going to say goodbye. We're actually going to say stay tuned for part 2.